Welcome back to the Lighthouse International podcast, lighting the way for your child to find their purpose and passion and live their best life. This is founder and director Eliza Rivas, and I am back again with Stephanie and Bosan from ARI. So welcome back, you guys.
Nice to see you again.
For those who did not tune in to the last episode, could you reintroduce yourself and talk a little bit about why you're here today?
My name is Stephanie. I am a full-time student at Washington University in St. Louis, and I'm also on the business team at ARI, which is a tech startup making an app. It's called ARI Reflection Journal on the App Store that serves as a GPS for your thoughts, helping you go from problem to resolution, from emotion to action in 3 to 5 minute sessions. And we're here to talk about emotional intelligence, how you can use self-reflection to enhance emotional intelligence, and what benefits that will bring to your day-to-day life.
Hi, I'm Boson, and I'm also a WashU student and also work in ARI right now. And today I want to share my perspectives on emotional intelligence and also share my stories about how I improve my productivity through my emotional intelligence.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. A question we want to pose to the audience getting started is, have you heard of emotional intelligence? And what does emotional intelligence mean to you? Whether you've heard it or not, what would be your first way of explaining that? Stephanie, could you give us a brief definition of emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so the formal definition is emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. Boson, what does that entail?
Okay, so there's 5 components, and this is stated by a famous psychologist, Daniel Goleman. So there are 5 components, which is self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. And by self-awareness, it's about, do you know about your pattern of emotion? And that jumps to your self-regulation. Based on your patterns of emotions, how do you deal with some situations? And for motivations, it's to set your own goal. And for empathy is to know your own feelings first, then you get to know others' feelings. And for social skill, you have to reflect on your social interaction with others so that you can improve afterwards. And by my own words of emotional intelligence, I feel like it's a skill level of how I deal with different situations. And improving emotional intelligence, we can better communications with others, we can manage a better relationship. We can also manage negative thoughts or maybe stress to improve our performance because we want to stay calm when we face difficulties.
Fantastic. I know that there might be a lot of listeners who have not really heard of emotional intelligence, though they do understand the 5 pillars that you were talking about. Those concepts might be more recognizable. For listeners who don't really know much about emotional intelligence, how can something like emotional intelligence in a practical way help better their lives, help better specifically productivity in their lives? Let's get into that a little bit. One thing I noticed when you were going through the 5 pillars is it talked a lot about self-reflection, which is why you guys are here. The only way I can really understand my emotions and the emotions of other people is I've taken the time to really reflect on that. So in your own lives, can you give me an example of how you have used emotional intelligence to increase your own productivity or the role emotional intelligence has played in your productivity?
One example that happens to all of us is that if you have a very strong emotion, it will often occupy a large space in your mind and prevent you from focusing on the things that you actually need to do to be productive. If you've ever had something major happen at work or at home, and then you get to the next task and you're still thinking about it, that's hindering your productivity.
Yeah.
And with high emotional intelligence, you can compartmentalize and or resolve that tension so that you're better able to focus. Another example is that a lot of our work involves working with other people.
Mm.
And our emotions are going to be different from other people's emotions. And whether or not you're thinking about it, you are in some emotional state or another.
Mm.
If that emotion is calm, if that emotion is novelty, if that emotion is engaged, you have an emotion, and the other people in the room also have an emotion. And so figuring out what that is and how to relate to other people, that will really help you work well with other people and work together to do what you need to do.
That reminds me of a meme I've seen where it looks different each time, but the concept is, I match other people's emotions. So how are we going to be feeling today? And that is not necessarily beneficial for being productive and in a workplace, at home, whatever the case may be. So I can see where you're coming from with that for sure. What about you, Bosan?
I want to introduce you guys about Mamba mentality. I don't know if you have ever heard of it. So it's first introduced by Kobe Bryant. Okay, so Mamba mentality actually impacted me a lot because I idolize Kobe Bryant, who is an NBA player. And one of the things that he talks about is like everything negative, which is maybe it's pressure, challenge, or anything else. It's an opportunity for one to improve. And I think this aligns with emotional intelligence because when you're having difficulties, you don't want to just give up or think about, oh, I'm doomed, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you want to improve yourself and be successful next time. I think the things that Kobe Bryant is doing is that he'll try his best to do everything. He'll pursue his goal at any cost. And that's why I idolize him so much, because when I was applying for Masters in the States, I have to prepare for a lot of content and maybe prepare for a lot of academic backgrounds, maybe like data or maybe like Python, etc. And those were the times that I actually want to give up because I feel like it's so pressured. And I feel like, why am I coming out of my comfort zone? Because I can stay in Taiwan and just get a real decent job. But then I look at the poster on my wall, my Kobe poster, and I was like, wait, what will he think? And I remember that he said that he can't relate to lazy people because they don't speak the same language. And he don't want to understand them. He didn't want to understand them, and he didn't expect them to understand him as well.
That's
and
powerful.
I feel like if I got to meet him, maybe in the heaven, I want to chat with him, and I want to understand him, and I hope he can understand me as well. So at that point, I feel like I look back at what I have done, and I feel like, is there anything else I can do more instead of, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I'm drained. And I feel like, no, I still play a lot video games. I still binge watching sitcoms. So I feel like, wait, yeah, I'm kind of lazy right now. I can do more instead of just give up. So I think for me, Mamba mentality actually teaches me a lot of things, like I have to strengthen myself and I have to have a clear goal, which is at that time is to pursue a degree in the States. And I think it really helps me a lot.
I love that. Because I've used Kobe Bryant in some of our Socratic launches at the school. So even though I wasn't familiar with that concept, I know what you're talking about. And two, just hearing that, there's a lot of things that we do on campus that is for that exact purpose. So one of the character traits that's a pillar for us is the idea that I pursue excellence. Now, excellence for us is not perfection. It has a very clear definition for all Acton academies. Excellence is, if this is my first time doing it, did I give my best effort? If I've done this before, did I do it better this time than I did last time? How does this compare to world-class examples? And is this something I would be proud to show out to the world? Like, that's our definition of excellence. And we talk about how heroes are tasked with pursuing excellence in all aspects of their lives, not just academics, not just this area or that area, but whatever you do, you're going to do it to the best of your ability on any given day. Now, my best when I'm sick, my best when I'm sad, my best when a lot of things are going on might look different, but it's still the best that I had on any given day. And that's something that is just a daily occurrence on our campus. And then working with them to understand that there is a difference between excellence and perfection. It doesn't mean I have to be completely perfect on everything I have to do. So I love that. And then I had never heard that part about laziness as a language, in a language I don't want to speak. That hit me. I don't know. Like that. Have you ever heard that, Stephanie? I don't know why, but that really hit me.
I think Kobe Bryant has a lot of really great quotes, and
Yeah.
because he's such a driven person, that makes him kind of attractive to us, to fans. And you would think that he's a really great basketball player, but he's not only a really great basketball player, but he also got an Oscar awards, and he also have a lot of big companies. And why can he become that? It's all because he have a really straight goal, and he will pursue at any cost. Because like when he was playing basketball, he'll ask like Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson for advice. But when he jumps to other area, he also seek for advices as well. And I think that's why he becomes so successful. And I also think we can mimic his behavior to improve ourselves.
I love that, because he was not only reflecting in and of himself, but then he was seeking advice, getting that outside reflection into this is what you're doing well. This is where you can improve this. Or, have you thought about these things? I know goal setting is also one of the heartbeats on our campus. So anything to do with badges, anything to do with progress. From the time they're 5, we introduced the concept of SMART goals. So with SMART being specific, measurable, attainable, related, relevant, and time bound, because that's what we've seen play out over and over. If you don't have an end goal in mind, you can't get anywhere. Like you can spend all of your time doing something, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It's like a treadmill. Now, sometimes the goal shifts and sometimes it changes and there's detours and this and that. But as long as you have a goal and you're moving toward a goal, as a learner, as a human being, then I can alter. If I never get started, if I'm just running in place, I don't have anything to change to make it better. So that's dead on. I love that. Out of the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, what do you think most or best affects productivity? And it could be like something personal for your lives or just in general.
I think it really depends on what you're trying to produce with your productivity. So I am in the business world, and for me, social skills is definitely the one that impacts my productivity most, because my ability to communicate with other people is a huge marker of how well I will do in my career. For some people, for example, people in the sports industry, motivation is what most impacts their productivity.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on what you're trying to do with your productivity.
What about you?
I also think that self-regulation is really important.
Ooh,
because
yes.
like a lot of times when we're feeling nervous or when we are feeling distressed, we just want to quit. We just want to lay and doing nothing. So I think the first thing we're trying to do is to manage our emotions, and we have to know how to deal with that emotions, because no matter what industry you're in, you have to perform at your best stake, no matter in what situation.
That's really, really true and very powerful. And in order for me to regulate that emotion, I have to understand what that emotion is. And I have to understand how that emotion presents within myself so that I can do things to regulate that emotion. That reminds me of when I became an owner. This was before COVID. So new owners had to fly to Austin, and we had to spend the day like on the main campus, the original campus, to kind of see the learners, to see an exhibition, to talk through things. And one of the things that we had to do, there was a section where we had to go in and have these really big Socratic discussions about really big issues, and you had to be willing to defend your stance. And before we went in, Jeff Sandifer gave us a big speech, and on the wall of the discussion room, like, so there's these big double doors. He runs an Acton MBA program. It's one of the best in the world. And that's where we had to have this discussion. And so it was an intimidating environment, right? And there were these like big double doors, and he gave us a speech, and he said, this is on the hero's journey. This is the call to adventure. This is where you have to be willing to take the risk to step out and do something new, even though you don't know how it's going to end up. And he challenged us to read this quote on the wall from Teddy Roosevelt and make a decision what we were going to do. And the quote that he had us read was "The Man in the Arena." I don't know if you guys have ever heard this quote. It's a fantastic quote and it's huge. I'm not going to read it all, but the idea is, even if the man in the arena has fallen, is bloody, is dirty, at least they're there in the fight. And no matter what the spectators around them are saying, he was the one in the fight. He was the one taking the risk to try. And even if he failed, he dared to fail greatly. And then we had to decide, are we going to take that dare? Are we going to take that risk? And are we going to walk in? So I do agree that knowing those feelings and knowing what to do with those feelings so that you can be intentional with what you're going to do with them. Just like I had to intentionally make that decision. Am I going to walk away from my career and everything I know to do this that no one has ever heard of in my area? Yes, because I had a why. I had an angle and I had a reason.
Self-awareness is a little bit vague, and I know a lot of people who think they're self-aware, but actually have no idea what self-awareness actually constitutes. Can you shed some light on what it looks like to not be self-aware, and how can you work towards overcoming that?
Oh, yeah, that is actually great. The first thing that pops in my mind when I think about the absence of self-awareness is when you hear someone speaking and their perspective on any given situation is polar opposite from everyone else involved in that situation, to the point where people are kind of looking at each other and like, wait, are we talking about the same thing? Because that was absolutely not what any of the rest of us saw, experienced, heard, or whatever. And it's interesting because I've been in situations with people like that, and often, like you said, they feel like they're like, I'm self-aware. This is exactly what happened. But because they weren't able to step outside of themselves to kind of see the forest through the trees, to see all of how these different pieces are playing together, they were actually very limited then. There are some people who are like, well, I'm just not going to work with that person. Or if that person can't read a room, I'm not going to give them opportunities to, move into management positions or whatever the case may be. It affects personal relationships, work, all of that sort of thing. But like self-reflection in the previous episode, I think it's often something that many people will say they do, not realizing that's not at all what's going on.
I think, like I mentioned during the last episode, self-reflection is not a solitary behavior. And I feel like I didn't really notice my self-awareness until I met Stephanie. So we discussed a lot of things and she asked me a lot of questions. And I feel like, oh, I have never think of that before. So I think to understand whether if we know about our self-awareness, you have to talk with others. And if you're able to articulate your thoughts, then maybe you have self-awareness.
Yeah.
That question, by the way, that I asked him was, list 5 things that constitute who you are.
It took me like half an hour to think of it.
Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Yeah. A huge part of self-awareness is understanding the distinction between yourself and other people. We see this a lot with kids who do something that hurts, annoys, upsets another child. And you ask them, how would you feel if someone did that to you? And you know what the kid says? The kid says, I would be fine with it.
That is an accurate portrayal. Yes.
What the child lacks is understanding that the other person feels differently, separating themselves from other people, and recognizing that the other person has different needs, desires, and expectations from themselves, and behaving accordingly. This is a huge part of self-awareness that isn't really thought of very much.
And it does make a huge difference. Just from hearing you talk, I was reminded that, and we use it all throughout, where we work the most with this is with our Spark Studio, our 5 to 7-year-olds. But a long time ago, when my children were very, very young, I have two very strong-willed children, but they're strong-willed in completely different ways. And so how I parent them has to be completely different. And they're both fairly different from me. So I really had to do a lot of research to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do this for their benefit? And I came across a book called Discipline That Connects with a Child's Heart. And one of my biggest takeaways from that book is they were huge proponents of something that they called restitution apologies. So the idea that you never force a person to say sorry, because that's lying if they're not actually sorry. And then they learn to play the game versus really thinking about how their actions are impacting other people and if they like the consequences of those things. So never forcing an apology. And when you've done something that has harmed somebody else, harmed their things, harmed their feelings, and it wasn't necessarily an intentional harm. So I can say something and not feel sorry that I said it and still feel bad because I didn't mean for you to cry, right? Instead, what they say is, okay, I recognize that you got hurt, that what I did hurt you, or what I did was not okay. How can I make that up to you? What can I do to make you feel better right now? And that kind of, I think over time really does build self-awareness, because then it's not about me proving I'm right or wrong, or, necessarily admitting like that I did something bad. It's me taking responsibility for the consequences of my words and my choices, and knowing that sometimes I have to clean up the messes that I make, even if I'm not sorry for them. So I love that, the idea of, you have to be aware of people outside of you, and that it is appropriate and completely fine if their feelings are different than yours would be in any given situation. So I love that. That's genius. Yeah. How do you see self-reflection helping to build that skill?
On self-awareness?
Yeah.
This plays out a lot in the professional sphere when you have a lot of different preferences for working style, types of communication, levels of monitoring, flexibility, structure, formality, and some things that you do that maybe you wish your coworkers did this for you. Maybe you wish your manager did this for you. Might actually not be what other people want. And it's very easy to say, this is what I would have wanted, so I'm going to do this for other people. But a self-aware thing to do is to check in with the other person and verify that this is actually what works for them. And the easiest way to do this is to simply ask them. If you have a large company with a formal structure, you could do a survey. You can do that in team introductions. As you work into higher emotional intelligence, you can use things like empathy and more social skills to be able to gauge whether what you're doing is working for them. But the first step to doing that is to recognize and have the self-awareness that what I want is different from what other people want.
Also, I think that by doing self-reflection, it's a little bit like training AIs like ChatGPT or Cloud. So like the more information you provide, the more accurate result it will generate. And if we provide a lot of our self-reflection things, maybe on our every app or maybe in your journal book, the more information you get to know about yourself, the more self-awareness you can get from those data.
Yeah, the more detail you put in, the more benefit you get out. I can totally see that. And I can see how that whole concept of, asking people, figuring out how they would like to receive information. It reminds me of a couple other areas. One is relationally with things like the love languages. So one of the things our learners do in the beginning of every year is we have our whole first session, our quest, which is our hands-on projects that we do, is called Build the Tribe. And one of the things that they have to do in that is they take tests to figure out their learning style. They take the love languages test to figure out their love language. They take personality tests. And then, and this is where our launch pattern has kind of leveled that up for us, because she's super into things like personality types. And why she's into it is she says it helps me be able to communicate better with other people in different circumstances. So if I know that this person prefers words of affirmation or prefers gifts or whatever, then when I want to recognize them and I want to celebrate their effort, that's going to look different depending on that person. Or if I know that this personality type flies off the handle if they're confronted in this way, then when I have an issue with that person, I'm going to go about it this way, because I know they're going to be much more likely to hear what I have to say, and we're going to come to a resolution faster. But all of that, again, is through not only reflecting on myself, but then really kind of grappling with that idea that, okay, so this is what I like and I want, but I'm dealing with people that do not feel that way. And how can I enjoy my time in this space, in this experience, and they also can be productive and they also can do whatever they need to do in this space together.
And this also ties into motivation as well, because the more self-awareness and empathy you have for the people you're around, the more they will be motivated to work with you to accomplish a common goal.
Yeah. Where have you seen that play out in your guys' lives, or have you seen that play out yet?
One thing that I see a lot in project manager roles that I've had before is that different people are on the team for different reasons, right? Some people are in it because they care about the client and they want to help the client do something powerful. Some people are in it for the career benefits. Some people are in it because they want something to do, and this type of work entertains them. And when I figure out what tasks and responsibilities I'm going to offer to each type of person, I have to keep in mind what motivates each person and what they are going to be excited to work on. The person who's using this project as a way to kickstart their career is going to want to demonstrate a lot of technical skills and have things that they can tangibly show off on their resume. The person who's in it for the joy of doing this work might be more interested in the collaborative strategic problem solving that might not yield observable results, but is very fun for someone who likes strategy. And so I had to recognize that my own reasons for joining the team is different from everyone else's reasons for joining the team. Number one. Number two, the reasons people have for joining the team are not necessarily the ones they're going to tell you. If someone's in it for the career benefits, for the dot on their resume, they're not going to say that up front. And so you have to figure it out through other means. And number three, thinking of the project in terms of its components that would align with different motivations. Thinking about the tasks that you assign to people, not just in terms of what they're good at, but what they would be motivated to do.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Well, Sana, have you had any experience like that?
So in fact, I want to let everyone know that Eliza is actually my previous client.
Yes, I am.
And I think I'm kind of have a lot of empathy. And from my empathy, I feel like I appreciate what Eliza's doing right now, because I feel like a lot of children were having difficulties in public schools. They might have different difficulties against others, and they might feel like they're strangers in public schools. And I love her thought about making children more independent and making them to know they're just gifted in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think one of my career goal is or maybe not career goal, maybe just my life goal is to help more people. And I feel like even though I'm not the one doing it, I can help to promote the program or the client or maybe other things. And I feel like if I haven't have this empathy or motivation, we're not going to have this podcast today. And I think this really helps me whenever it's working at Airy or maybe have relationship with you. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And it's great on my end. So because of the niche of what I do and how I choose to do it, things like self-awareness, self-reflection, like all of these things that we've been talking about over these past couple episodes, it's a daily part of my life. It was not always a daily part of my life. Like it's interesting as I look back on who I was, and even though I'm still me, I've changed so dramatically. Like by nature, when I was a child, I was a highly sensitive, highly emotional, highly empathetic child. Like you would look at me wrong and I would cry. I couldn't step on a ladybug. Like I was very fearful because I wanted to do everything right, and quiet because everything was all up in my head. And it's interesting the evolution I've seen my personality go through. Because, for instance, the fact that I'm doing this, so I'm a very introverted human being. Like my experience, because I did not get dramatically ill, no one I knew got dramatically ill. My experience through quarantine was like amazing. Like I did not have to leave my house for anything. And I loved that so much, like so much. It was exactly what my dream day would have been, because it takes a lot of energy for me to be around people, and it takes a lot of energy for me to have conversation. And naturally, I was terrible at large events where I didn't know people, where I had to make chit chat. Like I, by nature, am not a chit chatter. I do not strike up get to know you conversations. I hate icebreakers. Like that's just not me by nature, right? But because of what I do and the skills I'm trying to build in children, I had to change. And not because I felt like I was a bad person, not because it was anything I had to do with me. It was for me to be productive in building the habits and the skill sets I'm trying to build in young people, so they have a different world that they go into, and they can do things that my generation could never dream of doing, because no one ever told them they couldn't, right? So I had to learn how to have conversations. I had to learn how to talk. I had to learn how to be around lots of people that I don't know, and be engaged. Now I will say, so the whole concept in younger generations, I don't know what generation it started, but the whole like concept of the social battery, I'd never heard this before, but it makes sense, because what I would say when I was a teenager or a young adult is, okay, I am peopled out. Like I'm done, ready to go. I can't talk anymore. But it's been interesting, because when these are skills or habits that you're trying to instill in other people, it instills in you by nature, because at least who I am, I have to be genuine about anything that I do. I cannot say one thing and do something else, because then I can't model what it looks like, what it sounds like. And so I have to get to a point where I can be genuine in whatever I'm saying. And so it's interesting to see just how much you go, because people who meet me now have a very particular view of who I must have always been. And it just makes me chuckle sometimes, because that's just absolutely not who I was, like not at all. And so I can attest to the benefit of that consistent focus on self-awareness, that consistent reflection in, okay, well, that did not work. Where do I take ownership of that? What was beyond my control? If I'm in this situation again, what are 3 steps that I can take? It's that constant, being in that moment really does change and affect you for the better as a human being, whether it's job related, relationship related, whatever the case may be.
That's a great example of self-reflection, right? I mean, if you didn't mention it, I wouldn't think you as an introverted person, because like whenever I was having conversation with you, I feel like you're really good at conversation. You're really good at delivering your own image, your own personality. And also when I visited Lighthouse, you always introduced me in a really enthusiastic way. So I didn't feel like you're introverted. But now we are no less, I feel like you have done a lot of self-reflection so that you can have the achievement today, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, I didn't have the benefit of something like an app, which would have been wonderful. So for me, self-reflection, it took on many different forms. In my youngest years, it was letters. So I personally am a person of faith. And so I just felt awkward writing my thoughts down. So what I would do is I would write letters to God, and I would just be like, this person sucks and I hate the situation. Or one of the ones I talk about the most is, so I grew up in maybe lower working class family. And one of my earliest journals, when I found them as an adult, I think I was around 18 or 19. And I remember looking through, and I had written how amazing it would be if I could ever speak another language. I think at that time I was graduating high school. I'd been in Spanish, and it just fascinated me, the idea of being able to speak another language. And I remember writing, just it would be a dream of mine to ever leave the United States, right? And in my 18-year-old mind, that was like almost impossible. It was a very far reach. I'm a first generation college student. I, come from, like I said, a working class background, and those seem like unachievable dreams. But the fact that through all my wishing and my hopes and, what am I doing about that I would write in these letters. And then I look now, and it's weird. It's like a very surreal moment because I live in a bilingual home. So I switch back and forth between English and Spanish all the time. I'm learning 4 other languages right now, just because I really like languages and I think it's really fun. I've lived abroad. I've traveled abroad. I've just done stuff that, 20, 25 years ago was like as far-fetched as my imagination could go, just the idea of it. And I think had I not written that down in those days and not come across it in later years, the power of that moment would have been lost forever. Because I forgot I ever wrote that down. I forgot that used to be a life goal of mine, and I'm living it out every day. And so I love that there is something that not only can I do this in an easier way because, I don't have to have a notebook and my pen. I mean, if I want to do that, if I want to be old school, that's fine. But I can then track it over long periods of time, because it's amazing how much change can happen even in 1 year. But then when you layer that year after year and you see how you've grown as a human being, it's really mind-boggling. It really is.
I think that's one of the benefits of Airy, because we can help you record and maybe categorize your thoughts. And if you want to find a certain event, you can just search for it.
I love it. I love it. Are there other aspects of self-reflection that Airy has, or otherwise, that you think are really impactful in building my emotional intelligence or building my productivity that we've not mentioned yet?
One thing is, make a prediction before you start an interaction, and then see if that prediction was verified after that happens. So for example, I am about to meet new people at this big event, and I predict that people are going to look at me and not like me based on my clothes. And I also predict that I'm going to feel awkward the whole time, and other people will feel awkward when they talk to me. That's the prediction. Afterward, you can verify, did people shy away from me based on looks? Did people seem to feel awkward? Did I feel awkward? And being able to identify the difference between expectation and reality, and then also what you expect other people to do and what they actually do. I expected other people to walk away from me. Did that actually happen? Maybe there's something to learn from my understanding of other people and the way that perhaps this person is different from other people, and recognizing that. Another thing you can do is before you engage with other people, set an intention for what you want to do with this interaction. Do you want to share information? Do you want to enhance your social bond? Do you want to get a certain outcome? Perhaps you want to accomplish something. Regardless of what your purpose in this interaction is, whether it's to persuade them, inform them, entertain them, you're always also trying to form a bond with them. And think about how you want the other person to feel during this interaction. This often comes up when you're giving someone else feedback or communicating how they hurt you. How do you actually want them to feel? Do you want them to feel remorseful? Or do you want them to feel motivated to change? These are very different. One of them is going to make you feel satisfied, and the other one is going to make your life better.
It's kind of like that question, would you rather be right or happy?
And setting your intention for how you want the other person to feel beforehand will enormously impact the way you interact with them and how you convey your feelings to them.
I love that because I think these are things that happen subconsciously anyway. It's just now I'm making myself aware of them. I'm now setting an intention with them versus it's just these are thoughts that are happening and this is just what I think is going to happen. And I'm not paying attention much other than hearing that message. Now I'm bringing that message out and I'm setting an intention with it because maybe I do subconsciously every time I walk into a group think, oh, this is going to be awful. Like everyone's going to judge me. But then when I say that out loud and I set that with intention, I might want to change that and be like, well, that just sounds awful. Is that really what happens? That honestly isn't what happens most of the time. So how would I like for that to go? And then being able to shift that negative loop that could be going on subconsciously and hindering you and you didn't even realize that. What about you, Bosan? Are there any ways in which you feel self-reflection impacts my ability to grow in my emotional intelligence or productivity that has not yet been talked about today?
I think it's really important to do self-reflections when it comes to a new environment. Because like we have to face a whole new culture and maybe we'll have cultural gaps. And maybe what I have said to you is rude to you, but it's okay with me.
Yes.
And I think those might be improved when we self-reflecting more about it's like when maybe foreigners is talking Mandarin to me, well, maybe I'll feel offended as well. So how should I deal with it when it's me that might offend others? So maybe I can read their facial impressions. If I sense that they're feeling a little bit weird, maybe I'll have to express that I'm not trying to offend you, but if I do, please forgive me because I'm new to the environment. And I think by this self-reflection, by improving our social skill, it really can lead to a better productivity because it makes you have a greater relationship with others. So others are more willing to help you. And I know in the States, we're always talking about connections because maybe some of them will refer you to a big company. So how do you maintain those relationships? I think this is really important. And if I'm not self-reflecting, I will never know how to build a really healthy relationship with others.
And in new cultures, that could be literal, like you said, like dealing with people who are foreign born, or if you move to another country, but that can be, there are different cultures and all sorts of things. Every business has its own culture. Neighborhoods have their own culture. Socioeconomic levels have their own culture, their own way of communicating, their own unspoken rules. And you can feel really lost and insecure in those environments. And the only way to come out of those feelings would be to really reflect on it. What am I noticing? What worked? What didn't work? You know, having that time to really sit down and think about things. Think about how I'm feeling, thinking about the situations I'm in, the people that I'm communicating with, and making a plan. Then having an intention set. Okay, so when I'm in this environment, these are the parts of my personality I need to bring out. or I need to be more direct in my communication, or I need to be way more polite and more subtle in my communication. I think, yeah, that hits the nail on the head, because I just know from experience, there's so many ways you wouldn't think it, especially when it's within your culture, and especially somewhere like the United States. I can't really speak outside of the United States, but there are so many different cultures within the United States. And I'm not talking about necessarily ethnicity, that you can really feel like a fish out of water. So I love that. Yet again, something like airy journaling, self-reflection helps me to navigate that and get my footing. So I don't feel as I don't know what to do here, and then I'm worried I'm going to make a mistake, and then I probably do make a mistake because I don't have an intention set with that communication. So in wrapping up today, the 5 elements of emotional intelligence included self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So let's remind listeners of at least one tool or strategy they could use if they want to improve their own emotional intelligence or productivity. What is one skill or tool they can use to improve their self-awareness?
Identifying how the other person is different from yourself.
And we can do this by journaling, or maybe by self-recording, or just talk with others to know about yourself.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I remember mentioning is using resources by taking things like personality tests, love language tests, to not only help me understand what motivates me, what my preferences are in communication, but being able to understand the different options that other people can choose from in my dealings with them. What about self-regulation?
Understanding how you tend to react in certain environments by keeping a record of how different things make you feel and how you tend to react, and preparing for how you're likely to feel when that situation arises.
And I think this cooperates with self-awareness, because you have to have the self-awareness so you know how to regulate your emotions. You also have to know how you regulate your emotions so that you know about your self-awareness.
Right, because if I'm not regulated, I can't think about what I'm doing right now. I can't think about the why behind it, for sure. What about motivation? What skill or strategy or tool really helps me with motivation in dealing with emotional intelligence and productivity?
Keeping your goals front and center, and understanding what is the fire behind you that forces you to change, because staying the same isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm. I think with empathy and social skills is where there's the most tools and resources available. And we probably couldn't even touch on all of them in one episode if we tried. What is one tool that you want to challenge learners to try out in building their empathy or building their social skills?
I think there's a really great approach is when you read a novel or you watch a TV series and you list all the characters about their characteristics and their motivations. So by doing so, you can know about how different people think on their own perspectives. And if you excel at it, you'll have more empathy to others.
I love that, because that can easily be like the beginning step into then my reflections on my dealings with other people, and recognizing personality traits, recognizing reactions, and how I need to alter my communication with them from that. And it's a very neutral way to start. So I don't get any backlash from it. That's fantastic. I love that. Do you have one, Stephanie?
Before going into a conversation, record how you want the other person to feel during this interaction, and then afterward reflect on whether they actually did that.
That's powerful. I love it. Coming back around to the question we asked at the beginning, as far as do you know what emotional intelligence is and how would you define that? Knowing what you now know, what is one reflection tool that you think you can use to enhance your emotional intelligence? I do want to thank both Stephanie and Bosan from Airy. I'm super excited about the Android version of Airy coming out so that I can try it. I think the concept is genius, and I think that it uses a lot of the best practices that we use at Lighthouse and Acton Academies all around the world. to grow as a human being, to grow into that concept of me being a real life hero, whatever that looks like for my family, my neighborhood, my country. I've thoroughly enjoyed these episodes and getting to know more about Ari, spending more time talking about and understanding the role of self-reflection, because I think that is a skill that we all know is important, but might not know how to incorporate that into our daily lives and the benefit that can come away with. So thank you so much for your guys' time. Best of luck with Ari. And I will put a link to the Ari app for anyone who wants to know more information. And yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
you,
you.
Eliza.
Thank you.